Thank you all for coming at the end of the first day of the conference. I'm really excited to talk to you about this work and have been thinking about the need for more participatory activist type research that really yields benefits for everyone, that's being assessed across dimensions, but being designed together. And so thinking about how we can leverage what we're doing forward is important for me. And this is my first time at Ashoka, so I'm glad to be here. I'm Danielle Lake. I'm the Director of Design Thinking and a faculty member at Elon University. But my background is actually in feminist, pragmatist philosophy, looking at wicked problems, large-scale systemic crises like what's happening now, like food systems work, healthcare issues, and the kinds of practices that we need to address these challenges. Design thinking was one method among many others that I was studying in my PhD work to try to figure out how we can work together differently, what we could do different in higher ed. And since then, I just keep working on that stuff in various ways, and somehow I've landed here. So again, this is everything that I really am interested in thinking about. How do we create spaces where we can collaborate across institutions, across time, across stakeholder groups? For our goals for 30 minutes, or 29, 28, is just to simply frame what are we all doing around assessment and research? What are we finding? And then what do we want to be doing? Like, what do we want to know? What do we need to know? And how could we do this differently? So the first thing I actually wanted to do was ask all of you why you came to this, despite everything else you could have been doing with your time or other sessions that might have attracted you. I was going to give you each 20 seconds to think about that and throw your response into the chat box. So by the time this timer goes off, I'm hoping we can all sort of hit submit, like, why are you here? In my time, you know, it's 6:30 at night, my kids are running around playing outside. Why did you choose to come to this session right now? What are you hoping to get out of it? So if you can just make a note in our chat box, and then we can all kind of hit submit together and see what we were hoping for. We can replay that again. I'm realizing 20 seconds is really short, but as you have thoughts on why you came to this session, please throw them up in the box. Let me back up a second. So design thinking and systems thinking, we have one response here. I am as well. As a part of studying the wicked problem stuff, soft systems thinking and mapping was one of the things I was looking at. And thank you, Jonathan. Bringing departments together. So another initiative I did just before I came here was supporting engaged department initiatives. So how do we get faculty to work together within the departments and across campuses, which is incredibly hard. So I have some research on that. Cross-campus connection is so crucial. Absolutely. Let's see, MBC is developing a Changemaker program. How do we assess that? Excited to see how others are evaluating this. Oh yeah. Thank you, thank you. Learn evaluation strategies from others. Great. Let's see, the journey of melding my projects and my research into an action research agenda. Ooh, that's very exciting. Starting 2 action research projects. Yep. So how do we weave it all together? One of the pieces I'm writing on right now is how do you leverage service into that relational research work that's needed? And how do we make sure the research is informing teaching and kind of link them all together? So thank you, OD guy and practitioner of, what is OD? Yeah. OD stands for Ken? Organization development. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so hopefully we'll get to speak to some of this. Right here on this next slide, I'm just pointing to some of the research that's out there. Ashoka, you just published a practitioner's guide for assessment that you might want to look at. There's some great chapters in there. There's also, because as the Director of Design Thinking, I'm very interested in research coming out in design. And Lika and Barr have it's not even really published, but they've just created a validated research instrument that they've assessed 400 to 500 different businesses, nonprofit, government sectors on what kinds of design thinking practices they're using and what kinds of outcomes they're perceiving from those practices. And then they found that there are some super practices and some stuff that's really not that effective. And so there's some really interesting findings. And I thought comparing what they're doing in those sectors to what we're doing in higher ed would be really relevant. So that's what one of my studies are doing. So I wanted to, I'll circle back to that, but their findings are also showing that this is not something you need to be an expert in to see significant transformative changes in people's mindsets and their capacities and the outcomes of what you're doing. Moderate engagement with these kinds of skills and practices is yielding significant outputs. So the research they're publishing right now, I'm building on their studies. So I'll come back to that in a second. So I wanted to give you a few examples of what we're doing at Elon as far as assessment and research. One is a deep dive into our design thinking studio and social innovation. So this is a semester long. Students give their entire set of credits to a community-based participatory research type opportunity around a wicked issue. So it's collaborative issues around food systems and food justice. We're looking 3 and 4 years back, assessing not just the students who are now alumni, but also interviewing all of the community partners, interviewing all of the faculty that taught in that program to see what kinds of outcomes this kind of immersion yielded. How are we doing this well? How could we do it better? And so what I like about that approach is it's systemic. We're talking to all of the stakeholders, and that we're going to feed that back into the curriculum and the design of future programs. And so there's threads there of diving deep and going long term instead of just assessing at the end of a semester. And it's fascinating that this kind of work can build capacities over time, and you can capture that when they're alumni. And it's shocking how many times this came up in interviews, and how transformative it's been in the kind of out in the real world for students, but that it's also built community partners capacity. So even when projects died on the ground that semester, there were other capacity building components of what they were doing that they've yielded into. So anyways, it's emerging right now, but that's one study we have. The second piece I wanted to highlight at Elon is the need to build networks and relationships. So we have something called the Coalition for Change that we did with Ashoka U's Millions of Changemakers, bringing people together across campus to align our initiatives, our centers, our curriculum, to really create so that we can generate pathways for students that are significant, that dig deep. So mapping our network, really. And this reminded me of how incredibly relational this work is. If you're going to do research on and with your communities, then they have to believe you, see you, and trust you, which leads me to the third study we're doing right now, which is mapping the ecosystem of design thinking across campus. So who's doing what? Again, this is leveraging the Bar and Lika research that's coming out right now that was examining this in business, government, nonprofit. We're using the same kind of survey instrument, but assessing our courses. We have 37 courses and programs that we've assessed. And what's shocking to me is that all of these faculty were willing to take the time to be surveyed and to be interviewed. And without that relationship building piece, I don't think that would have happened. So literally our response rate was incredibly high. And we were focusing on those who are engaging with our Center for Design Thinking. So the survey, the research is focusing on what practices within this scope are you using, what design thinking practices are happening in your classroom, what outcomes do you perceive, and what's the relationship between the two, or what might it be? And what I find really potentially valuable here is that we could then flip that survey to students. We will have faculty perceptions of what we're doing and what outcomes we think or hope are happening. And we would have students telling us that, and then we could track that over time. What did students feel like was happening in the classroom? What outcomes do they perceive they gained from it? And so that's what we hope our next step will be. We would also love to do this work across university structures. So that's not just Elon, but we have Duke University interested, UNC here in North Carolina. And part of what I'm hoping to do is build that network of support and support each other. And it doesn't have to be this research here, but there's opportunities. So I wanted to bring that up. So this just shows the courses and programs across campus that we're engaging, and that we're engaging all of our schools or colleges are involved here. We have graduate programs, undergraduate, first, second, third, fourth year courses. We also have programs that are doing this work deeply throughout the entire program of study, like environmental studies, design thinking is woven throughout, entrepreneurship, but then we have people who are dabbling. So there's a lot of comparisons we feel like we can make there. Yeah, so that's just something we're analyzing the data now, finishing up interviews so that we can launch that next step and reach out to students and alumni, but also start to build that cross-institutional research that we really want to value. The other thing I would say here is that our findings are in many ways mimicking what they found in business sectors, in government and nonprofit. Right now, it looks like a lot of us are leaning heavily into the front end of design thinking. We're doing a lot of exploring, a lot of empathy building, but we're not doing a lot of prototyping, iterating, learning by making, getting that stakeholder feedback, like really going deep into that second back end. and there's opportunities for growth. So they found that, I'm finding that too. I wasn't that surprised in like a liberal arts undergraduate institution that we would be leading into talking and building our empathy and stuff like that. But we're already seeing some interesting findings, and I'm interested to extend that out. And what differences would we find if we look at engineering versus philosophy and so on? So again, we're just now doing that assessment. A couple things I wanted to say about participatory action research. I have a publication on this. We did a lit review looking at it across, it spans so many different fields, right? It's kind of a disposition. What are the practical, epistemological, and ethical challenges of this work? What are the benefits? Why would you do this, right? And part of it's about, as in the sessions earlier today, it's about self-awareness, self-reflection, and being clear about who we are and where we're situated, and then inviting others into that space so that we can co-design together. But there are serious challenges to that, especially within the way a lot of times IRBs function, within the way universities function. So we just kind of visualize some of those challenges when you look at this across all of those different fields. This work is incredibly messy, it's emergent, it takes a really long time. In fact, there's a just published article about how design thinking can enhance community-based participatory research practices, but how CDPR can enhance design thinking, right? So community-based research takes a really long time to build those relationships, to build that trust, and often nothing happens, or people leave because they get so frustrated before anything is emerging. And so this focus on prototyping, on reducing the risks and acting and building together and design could enhance participatory research. But the need to really build relationships of trust across difference needs to be infused into design sometimes, right? Instead of designing for, we need to design with. So if anyone's interested in that publication, I'd be happy to share. This one, we talk about the risks and the challenges, as well as the merits, right? This is embedded in social justice, it's relationship focused, it's about yielding outcomes, understanding our place, all of these great things that I feel committed to. The other thing I just wanted to point out is right now, again, it's my first year, but I value doing that deep dive longitudinal work. I'm looking at kind of case studies of what's happening and looking at it across sectors. I'm really valuing that kind of geographic mapping, what's happening across our universities, right? And that second study we have going. I would like to see us, though, I think there's opportunities to also engage administrators if we're interested, because they share a lot of power in this work. So what's their perspective on it? Some questions we can ask ourselves if we want to do this work: who controls what counts? You know, what are we assessing? This came up in all of our other sessions today, and I'm guessing will come up tomorrow, so you all already know it. Who has the capacity to act? This comes right out of PAR research. But again, another reason I was so grateful to host this session with all of you is because there are opportunities at our university to host think tanks to co-design research together that we would all value. To bring people together, and I would love to do that, or to be in your spaces, or to do it virtually or whatever else, so that we can learn from each other. One of the reasons I loved picking up on the prior study is to learn across sectors as well as institutions. So that think tank, we also have an opportunity, if something emerges from that shared research, to support each other over our model at Elon is a 2-year research project that spans outward, but it brings people together every summer to design together, go back and implement together, come back, to the drawing board the next summer, launch that out and publish those findings, either through openly accessible book publications or journals or whatever makes sense for the group. But to host that or to facilitate these kinds of practices is what I'm really interested in. So again, these kind of think tank models of how do we do this work together to support each other, to critically study what's effective here. And especially over the long term, research there is missing. Talking to alumni, talking to partners seriously, and including their voice in this work. So now I just wanted to take time to hear from all of you. What are you doing? What do you know about this stuff? And what do you want to be doing? And so again, I thought we could just use the chat box to start, and then just free for all, whoever's willing to speak up, if you are, just talk about what you're interested in. But first, let's take like 45 seconds, a minute, to talk about what we're each doing and what we want to do moving forward. Like, where are your interests? Does any of this spark anything for you? And I can't help it, but with design thinking, go big. I'm interested in wild, crazy ideas, even if it seems really expensive under the constraints of now, but also those bare bones. Like, I was realizing a think tank can happen virtually very easily. So any ideas you have and what you're hoping to do, what you're currently doing and what you're hoping to do, if you could summarize that quickly in a couple of sentences in the chat box. I was going to give you 45 seconds and then open it up to see what everyone has to say. So we have a lot of people starting to list their projects if we want to read those over. And then anybody who's interested or willing to speak up first, I would love to hear your thoughts, share them out.
This is Eric Schwartz with College for Social Innovation. I can share a little bit. Thank you for sharing your stuff. It seems really, really interesting. I love Elon. I visited right before the sort of pandemic got to the next level of seriousness with my daughter. It's just so beautiful. My sense is that a lot of this, what I would call high impact learning, type you're talking about, probably each of us are working on, is differentially accessed quite a bit based on student level of privilege, sometimes income, membership or not membership in different underrepresented groups. So I'm really interested in looking at how do we equalize access to this kind of learning, just assuming it's really a good thing. And also with like more and more reporting, more and more discussion of the mental health challenges that I think students have been probably always faced, maybe been talked about more recently, and are probably going to be even more acute in the kind of COVID-19 era. Can we look at the impact on student mental health and resilience of much of the learning and teaching that you're describing?
Thank you, Eric. Can you tell us where you're situated?
Yeah, so we're in Boston. We team up with about a dozen different colleges and universities in New England to offer the Semester in the City program, which is a 1 semester, 16 credit, sort of full immersion study away program. Students leave their campus, they come to Boston. It's built around an internship, about a 400-hour internship in the social change world, but there's also about 8 hours a week of classes and kind of reflection on the internship. And I'm going to do a session tomorrow at 10:15. We're seeing some really positive outcomes and striving to have it be a really diverse group of students, but want to keep pushing ourselves to do that even more and measure that even more deeply.
Thank you. I love the focus on resilience as well. This research has led, all of this has led me into looking at resilience and looking at metrics for that, and the focus on who gets access to this and who signs up and why, and we change that. In fact, at Elon, again, this is my first year, but pressing them, having the opportunity, we're known for engaged experiential learning, but to ask the questions of for who and to what end, and who's even in the space, and how diverse and equitable and inclusive is it? And we don't have a lot of numbers on that, right? Why aren't we thinking more deeply about that? And we are now. So is there any research on from what you've described, are you already doing some of that assessment and research, or it's all?
We're doing a lot internally, pre and post assessments of the students 6 months afterwards. They've got these mentors for their 400-hour internship, and the mentors are rating them across 20 different areas, middle and end of the semester. So there's a fair amount of, I think, sort of authentic kind of competency-based research, and we know their demographics. But I guess I've been thinking more very recently about the mental health aspects. 36% of our students had identified mental health challenges they thought could potentially interfere with their ability to fully succeed in the program. And I think, most of them are fully succeeding, but I feel like that number is going to even grow over time. And how can we more explicitly build the kind of supports that allow students to be tackling kind of wicked problems in authentic and difficult places and situations, while also having the kind of support that makes that a resiliency builder for them.
I just want to say briefly that everything you're mentioning sounds incredibly timely and important, and especially with what's going on now. Elon has a huge focus on wellness and resilience over the past couple of years, and an act belong commit model that they've based a lot of research on and have pulled in these big speakers. And so efforts to design a collaborative project that was valuing the need for tracking well-being, resilience, what this looks like, place displacement given COVID-19, given what's happening, like, and then how that weaves into wicked problems. All of that sounds really, really important. Other people that wanted to speak into this thread or just share a little bit more about what they were thinking. A lot of us wrote stuff down here.
Well, I can share a little bit.
Peace.
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Malia. And I mentioned earlier in the thread that I'm working on 2 action research projects. And it's interesting because they're around the work that I do, which is really like changemaker development, but they're with really different populations. And so I think the focus of the research is really different. And Eric, what you were saying just kind of sparked in me some thoughts about, you know, for us, I have found in my own research, my dissertation research, that for nonprofit professionals in a Kenyan organization, that learning design thinking was really about like developing a sense of agency for them. So not about like the technical problem solving, but that having that capacity and that capability and doing that kind of learning was this empowering process. And I really believe that that is really important for people in their workplace, right, when they're working for social mission organizations. But the first research project that I'm working on that I mentioned was around critical service learning with our introduction to social innovation students. So these are, you know, undergraduate students, and not all of them, but at Tulane, it's a primarily white institution. There's a lot of economic privilege. Again, not everyone. But what we are finding that we have to battle in our program is like the heropreneurship and the white savior complexes. So with our critical service learning program, we talk about how we actually like don't really let the students drive very much at all. You know, it's like we have this one project where youth from a youth leadership program in our community teach our students, and that's their service. And they totally don't get why that's service at first, because they're like, well, you should be teaching them. But then, you know, my other research project is the one I presented on this morning, is with a community board, a group of grassroots, local neighborhood volunteers working with an organization here who are, you know, primarily Black women between the ages of, you know, 25 and 50, who live in a lower income neighborhood and are just trying to do something great for the kids in their neighborhood. And that's more around teaching them design thinking and trying to create the space for them to drive these design processes that we're doing. So all of what you all were talking about got me really like reflecting on the role of agency and where we want that to play a role in changemaker development. And sometimes for certain groups, I actually don't want them to have too much agency in that moment. I don't know if that makes sense.
Can you describe the first project a little bit more to help me?
Sure. So this is about looking at our 200 level Introduction to Social Innovation course, which has a service learning component. And we are exploring through interviews and, you know, student reflections and interviews with the partner stakeholders, what are some of the, you know, effects and experiences that students have with our critical service learning model, and showing that critical service learning is usually a framework that's used later on in more developed service projects, you know, longer term, more project based, and this is 20 hours of, you know, go work on this farm and take these workshops. But how does that start them on the journey of maybe developing humility or paying attention to equity or, you know, mutually beneficial partnerships? Yeah, so those are sort of our questions.
Thank you. And that's another reason why I'm really interested in tracking this over the long term. So if you look at how much growth can we expect in 3 months or with 20 hours or with, right? How much transformation should we see at the end of a semester, and what metrics are out there to help us see where students are starting and where they're at in 3.5 months, but where are they at a year from then, 2 years from then, and where are we trying to go? And so again, working on like that cross-disciplinary research as well, so that we can pull in different experts on how to track for this over the longer term and how to design with what we're learning. I would critical service learning, and there's another piece that just came out on subversive service learning that some of you might be interested in as well. Yeah, where you focus on the privilege, right? And it's a very different kind of, it's it might even be 2020, or it was at the end of 2019. I was able to share that first article I mentioned about how design thinking can enhance CBPR practices. And at the end, they point to the fact that community-based participatory research could also inform and reform how we do design sometimes, right? But they don't say much there. They say, we need to say more. We need to talk more about this. But there's another piece that was just out at the end of, I think at the end of last year, on what they called subversive service learning. Anyone else? I know we have like about a minute left, and I would love to hear from anyone else.
I would say I'm kind of coming from the student aspect. I'm a junior at the University of St. Thomas. So kind of like we talk about like student engagement and how do we get students involved. So this is my third exchange, and I can like say hands down, like the biggest way for us students to get involved is really being able to connect with these other students, which I think is really, really a cool opportunity of this exchange. And also like when you have peer institution and peer groups, one of my really good friends in changemaking is John Alexander Harris at Tulane, who is super involved with changemaking, and I presented with him last year, as well as multiple other students at USD. So it's just like, yes, like we learn a lot from our professors and teachers, but there's another level when students are able to lead. So at the University of St. Thomas, what we've done is we've created our own small Ashoka team of students, and they're on our change team. And every year we put on events to interact change-making with our students and understand what change-making means to them. And the success and the interaction rate has been super high. We got a big ball pit, and we put it in the middle of our atrium of our student center, and we had students hop in there and talk about random things just to build community about change making and getting to know each other and work about personal and local change making. So like, don't be afraid to bring students into a lot of these things, because I think they have a lot of untapped potential.
Thank you. The one thing I forgot to mention briefly was that a lot of the research I'm doing is also infused with undergraduate researchers. So I'm partnering with students in designing and assessing the research as we go. And then I'm hoping to partner with them in the design of curriculum as we move forward. So inviting them in. But I loved your point as well about students working with students, and that's one of the most powerful pieces. As we interview alumni, hands down, that's what they remember. They're still talking to each other years later. It's the relationships they built, right? It's the experiences they had. They forgot the readings. They didn't forget the lived experience, like what they tangibly did and lived, or each other. And the same was true of the faculty and the community partners in the program. So I know we're out of time, and I want to say thank you. I have my email up there. I am happy to connect with anyone. Like I said, we supporting each other is what I want to do, and sharing honestly and assessing this work, both the challenges, the barriers, the roadblocks, the failures, which I think we should be talking about more honestly. But also when and if this is moving the needle forward in any way. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, folks.